This is TK Coleman, and you're listening to Small Business Edge by Ceteris. This is the podcast where we deconstruct small business entrepreneurship through conversations with franchisees, passion-based business owners, and other experts. We learn what it takes to succeed. When I was looking for a business, I wanted one that was scalable, but not a startup. That led me to explore franchising options. I quickly ruled out food businesses due to the proliferation of brands, upfront investment, and complexity. I also decided against territory-based sales businesses as they are not scalable. That led me to the personal care category and ultimately to Blow. Those are the words of today's guest, Jeremy Bollington. Jeremy is a franchise partner of Blow, located in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, and he's also an area representative. Before Blow, Jeremy spent 20 plus years as a banker in London, Hong Kong, and New York. He built big and successful teams over the last 10 years at 2 different institutions. In 2015, he decided it was time to explore something different. Today, we discuss that journey. We also talk about the failures and insights that Jeremy accrued along the way. If you're someone that's considering entering into the franchising world, or you simply want to level up your game, this is one episode you don't want to miss. Up next, Jeremy Bollington. So Jeremy, everyone loves to travel. Everyone has dreams of, backpacking across Europe or seeing the world. You are someone that's lived that dream. You've lived in many different places, worked in many different places. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure, TK. So I spent 25 years plus as a banker. Grew up in the UK, started in the UK, had the chance to come out to New York, which my wife and I jumped at. Spent a year in Hong Kong in 2005, and then back to New York. And we were in New York for kind of the financial crisis, and as the world came out of that. It was I guess a typical sort of corporate career. Making my way up a pretty big organization. I spent most of that career with HSBC, big London-based emerging markets bank. Lots of different roles, and always opportunity. It was a great time.
Let me go back to the crisis in New York. You said you were there at that time. What was the biggest way that impacted you personally?
Yeah, it was from a career perspective. It was really interesting. I got asked to run kind of the client coverage team for HSBC in New York, literally in April 2008. So the kind of battlefield promotion, and we were restructuring the business, reducing headcount. Just a really difficult time, but it was I learned so much, and then we came out of that in great shape and had a couple of years of really great business, and just it was a lot of fun running a business as you came through that tough time. But you learn so much in those difficult times, for sure.
Absolutely. We'll talk a little bit more about your trajectory from the past to the present, but let's come forward to the present for a moment and tell our audience a little bit about the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, so I made a transition in 2015. I'd actually moved firms in 2011, spent 4 years with another bank, and then got, as the HR folks would say, restructured out, and was left with the choice of what do I do? Do I stay in banking? Do I go to another firm? And we'd been building a house down here in Charleston, and my youngest had just gone to college, and my wife and I decided it was time to go do something different. And so long story short, I looked at a whole series of franchises and picked a couple of brands. We had decided we wanted to run our own businesses. And so today I'm the owner operator of 2 franchise brands, Blow Dry Bar, and Waxing the City, both here in Charleston. And I'm also a developer for Blow, so helping them grow across the Southeast in North, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee.
So you talked about this process of you and your wife looking at different places. Did you specify at that time that you wanted to go into a specific type of industry, or you were just looking to get started anywhere?
I think we started, I think from early on in that process, we knew we wanted to do franchising. I felt I didn't have any good enough ideas to start completely from scratch.
Sure.
And it was also, I was turning 50 at the time and said, you know what, this is, I want to see what I can build over an 8 to 10 year period.
Yeah.
And it felt like franchising was kind of the good, the middle ground, if you were, with finding proven systems, not starting completely from scratch. But nevertheless, let's be clear, running your own businesses. I mean, you're still very much a business owner. It's not a path to kind of great results without hard work and that on your own businesses. So we kind of we started looking broadly at franchises, but very quickly narrowed it down to looking at bricks and mortar businesses that I felt I could grow with scale over a period of time. Didn't want to do food. That just felt too difficult. And so we started really looking at personal care brands and was trying to find something that wasn't a complete startup, but wasn't built out, with limited territory availability. And got introduced to Blow. I had no idea what Blow Dry was at first. Got introduced through a consultant and started to dig in and really kind of liked the concept. Completely understood what the niche was and why it was growing so rapidly. And looked at all the there are two national players in Blow Dry, and then a number of people trying to build that are at a very small scale. Talked to them all and really liked the people at Blow and liked the branding and the way the business was positioned. And so we dove in on that. We also initially I wasn't intending to do a couple of different businesses, but we also spent a lot of time looking at the waxing business and the landscape, and decided as well to partner with Waxing the City, which is actually a very similar kind of position to Blow. They were similar size, 50, 60 locations around the country at the time, good availability. And again, I liked the people and I liked the brand, and felt that it was a differentiated brand that we could build here.
What I like about your story is that it defies this stereotype that people who end up doing interesting things start out by discovering what their passion is and then following a linear path. It seems like you went into a field that you had no familiarity with, but you were passionate about discovering new things. You were passionate about taking on new challenges, and this isn't something that you loved since you were 12 years old. I like that part of things. And so let's take a pause here. And for people who don't know much about Waxing the City or Blow, what are the actual services you provide and how can people find out more?
Yep, sure. So I'll start with Blow. So the Blow Dry niche has really built over the last 10 years or so. And essentially the core service we provide is styling of hair for women. Typically, somebody's going to an event, got a big meeting, maybe it's here in Charleston in particular, maybe they're in town for a wedding, for a bachelorette party. Somebody's getting a new picture done for their LinkedIn profile, or any number of reasons. And really what we offer is kind of convenient luxury. I describe it as, it's easy to make appointments. You're not typically locked into a specific stylist. We've got a great team of stylists that kind of can provide any style that you choose. And we one of the taglines for Blow is wash, blow, and go. That's basically what we do. So somebody will come in, we'll shampoo the hair, blow dry it, and style to your desire. And then we also do add-on things such as makeup, which is becoming an increasingly meaningful part of the business.
And you have a new location opening up in 3 weeks, right?
Yep, we do. Today we operate one location here. Those that know the Charleston area in Mount Pleasant, we're about to open in the heart of King Street downtown. So yeah, my next stop this morning is going to find where my contract has gotten to and check in on progress on that. And then on the Waxing the City side, we're a dedicated waxing studio, so hair removal for both men and women, all body parts. And that's, we provide, we think, a service that's just very much focused on the client, not focused on how many clients can you get through in an hour. It's a very thorough service, and clients love it. Great feedback from the clients on the brand and the proposition.
Now, most franchise owners I meet are very busy people, and you have your hands in a lot of things. You have multiple locations, and you wear multiple hats in the roles you play. How do you do it all? Like, what does your average day look like? I'm very curious about your workflow system, your time management. How do you keep it all together?
That's a really good question. I think it's, I think most of us probably would admit that we could do a better job of that.
Sure.
How do I break things up? So if I look at, kind of right now, with particularly as we head towards opening a new location, that's sort of taking a lot of the time in terms of prep for that. But I think one of the really key things, and I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with when you're setting up businesses, you kind of at some point you reach a tipping point where you've got enough size and scale to have a team beyond what I would call just the practitioners that are, whether it's the stylists or the estheticians. And I think we're sort of getting towards that point. So on my waxing business, I have a full-time manager who's been there from day minus 30 from before we opened, and she's great. She runs that business day to day. I spend my time on that business on things like marketing, some of the back office, that whether it's the accounting, which setters, by the way, make a lot easier. Insurance, and all that type of stuff. On the blow dry side, we've recently added a manager who we think is going to be great and is going to run both of our locations. So that's taking a number of things off both myself and my wife. But I think on that business, we both spend time on marketing. Hiring in that business is critical. It's a much bigger team. You tend to have a lot more part-time employees on the blow side, because the business is very skewed from a volume perspective to Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So you need lots of staff. Then you then spread them out over the quieter days for that business, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, typically. So we spend a lot of time on that, spending time at kind of cosmetology schools, working on hiring. And then the third part of my world is working with Blow on recruiting franchisees in the Southeast. So I spend a good proportion of time on that, and I think that's something that I think when you sort of what I found in transitioning from a corporate role where I was running a business, so I was very much in control of my time, but nevertheless, lots of other people pulling into that, whether it was meetings or other things. I think when you're a business owner, and particularly in startup mode, a lot of it's falling on you, and you fall back to how do you prioritize, and just trying to be really good at prioritizing things. And then as you get rolling along, making sure you're not just getting sucked into day-to-day problems and challenges, but you're being more strategic about the business. And that's where I really, every now and again, I'll step back to try to make sure that we're actually doing that and not just getting sucked into day-to-day challenges.
I like that distinction there. It's so easy to get caught up in the weeds of managing day-to-day details. Like, what are the things I have to do to make sure I don't go out of business? But that's a different set of questions from what are the things I need to do to make sure I'm growing, that I'm becoming more creative and so forth. So one big part of your productivity is you have great people around you. You seem like you have a pretty solid team. And this is one of the biggest struggles that new franchise owners face. How do you build a great team? So what tips do you have for people that maybe have trouble finding good employees or finding reliable people who work with a sense of ownership?
No, I think that's a great question, TK. I think it's almost like trial and error. I think. I mean, I think, the reality is in these types of service businesses, the margins are such that it's not like you can go out and make a really high level experienced hire typically. The margin's just not there at the starting point. And so, I think what we've found is, you look for, it's kind of looking for, I sort of describe you looking for people that, kind of, it's not a job, but it's more that they see that they want the accountability, they want to grow. And I think as I think of the two, key managers that we've got in place now, I would say they both fit that criteria. But it's it's the toughest part, I think, of being a small business owner. I think when you, like I said earlier, I think that you get to that tipping point where it gets easier because as your organization gets bigger, the nature and the scope of the roles potentially get bigger, and I think that makes it easier, perhaps. I hope to continue to add to the team. But equally, I think it's also I'm hoping that the people we've got on board now will grow into those roles that you can offer that sort of scope for growth.
How did you build your team specifically?
I think it was it's in terms of the key players, it was just a very sort of thoughtful process of hiring, I think, and just being rigorous on that. In the case of our blow manager, actually, she came to us through, we actually acquired a local business that we're converting to blow, and she was running that day to day. So that we got lucky, I think.
Yeah. So I'm curious about this. This is kind of off the topic, but when you're interviewing people for a position and you've looked at the resume, you've checked references, you've done all those things, do you have a go-to question that you like to use to gauge where people are, if they're a right fit?
Not particularly. I wish I did. I'm always looking for for me it's I find sort of when I'm interviewing somebody, I think very quickly whether there's a connection, there's that particularly if you're looking for that type of role, you're looking for somebody that's going into a managerial position, that they're looking for that growth. They want the accountability. So I tend to sort of try to focus on that. Give me examples of where you set goals. And actually I remember somebody saying a while back, one of their favorite questions was talk to me about where you set goals and you didn't meet them, and what happened. Why or what happened? What did you do about it? And I think that's a good one to push on.
So let me follow up on that question because I really like that one. Tell me about a time that you failed in your business journey, and how did you learn from that or cope with that?
Yeah, I set myself up for that, I guess, didn't I? It's a good question. I think if I'm thinking about the most recent sort of journey and in the small business ownership context, I think the hardest part in service businesses are is the staffing piece, and the day-to-day practitioners, so the stylists, the estheticians. I think the market here in Charleston is very tight right now, and on the blow dry side in particular. The market here with the destination kind of wedding business is huge. That sort of pulls a lot of cosmetologists into that business, and those are typically the people that we're looking for blow because they love styling as opposed to cutting and coloring hair. And I think we faced challenges in our first few months of operation of just physically having enough stylists. And, on the one hand, a great problem, a full book of business on a Friday, Saturday. But if you can't, staff that fully to to meet that demand. There's nothing harder, I think, in a business of turning customers away because you don't have enough staff. And we faced a couple of some challenges when some staff moved on, and I think it really, how did we overcome it? It really forced both my wife and I, who my wife's also involved in the business with me, and it forced both of us to really focus, very hard on the hiring side, and which we had been, but probably not with enough intensity. And that facing that challenge, we had some difficult weekends where we were running with a handful of stylists and turning clients away, and so we've got to solve this. And so it forced us to look at our sort of compensation structure and to really double down on efforts with the cosmetology schools and other things. So it's a great learning experience ultimately. And then when we got through it, and it gave us the confidence then to move forward and look at a second location. You can then look back on it with kind of pride, I think, that you got through that.
Yeah. I love that. So let me do a failure story follow-up. One persistent myth that I love to challenge is that there's this stage of success you get through where you get to where failure is a thing of the past. It's the fancy part of the movie or the biography about your life, but now you're coasting. What's something that's not coming together easily for you right now? How are you currently failing, and how are you coping with that?
That's a good question. I think, I was going to say as well, I think any business that, gets to the point where they feel they're coasting, that the danger at that point is complacency. And I think that's a killer in any situation. So I think, you always, even if things feel great, you have to be constantly asking, like, what do we need to focus on? What could, how do we, whether it's growth or whether it's maintaining and kind of a stable business. One of the things I wrestle with generally, and this is more of a focus on my waxing businesses, it's on the marketing side. It's, in that business, we've got a lot of competition. There are a lot of different waxing studios, and I think something that we probably underestimated was bringing a new brand to a market, and then the challenge of building that brand in the market, and then effectively kind of like measuring where you spend and how you market. Every form of media that you can use for marketing, everybody has a great pitch.
Yeah, sure.
And why they're specific, whether it's mailers, billboards, radio, etc. And in a lot of cases, it's really hard to measure that. And I think that's probably one area we're wrestling with at the moment, as to, with a certain budget to spend on marketing, how do you maximize that in a space where there's a lot of competition? So the marketing piece is really critical.
I've heard it said once that someone said, I waste 50% of my resources on marketing, and I get 50% right, and I never know which is which. It's so hard to know what works. I like to know what has worked effectively for you.
Yeah, and TK, I would say I totally agree with that 50-50 comment. I would say the biggest thing for us, and something that I certainly advise others to focus on, in particularly in the businesses that we're in, which are obviously very consumer centric. It's definitely the digital presence, and in particular the Google presence. I can't tell you how many times I when I ask clients, how did you find us? They'll say either we were Googling for the whether it's for a blow dry or for waxing, saw your reviews. And so one of the things and this is almost, it's sort of organic, because a lot of the work is organic on that, in terms of, kind of working with clients that have expressed that they've loved the service, to say, hey, would you mind, taking a couple of minutes to post a review? And so we've actually found that ironically, an area that we're not having to spend money on per se has been perhaps one of the best drivers of business. And then I think added on to that, we certainly spend a lot of time and a good amount of our marketing budget on paid search. So, pay-per-click, Google ads. And I would say that for us has been most important.
Are there any marketing don'ts that people should know about? Any mistakes perhaps you made or you see new franchise owners commonly make when it comes to marketing?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for anybody coming into, and I think in a lot of cases, people coming into franchises don't necessarily have a background in consumer marketing. If you're in a consumer business, I would say the biggest thing you have to battle through is that element of you'll get pitched by a lot of people. As you join, I think most of us as business owners tend to join, the local chamber of commerce, the business associations. The marketeers are generally at those organizations, and everybody has a great pitch. And I think trying to filter through, what makes most sense for your business relative to the budget. You look at some franchise systems that their model is, they put an enormous spend into, saturating the market almost. I think of a couple of the fitness businesses that are opening up here in Charleston, and you look at the amount of advertising you see. Yeah. But in a lot of cases, the franchise model doesn't necessarily have that level of marketing budget spend requirement. And I think then the challenge is, how do you allocate that? What we've done is, there's an element of trial and error. Don't do everything all at once, because if you do, you're not really going to know where, it's hard to track where people are coming in from generally, and what prompted them to come. No matter how much you ask, it's hard to track that. And so I think, it's that, I think avoid, kind of either getting tied into big spend commitments on one thing until you know that it's working, and then do trial and error on multiple different venues and see what works for your business.
That's really good advice, because when you're new, there's so much pressure to come out of the gate with both guns blazing. You just want to try everything that looks like it can work, because ultimately what's important is that you get people through the door. Yeah. But like you said, being able to know what's worth repeating down the road is absolutely critical. So it sounds like you almost have to approach it with like a scientific mindset. You're conducting scientific experiments in what works in marketing. You have a hypothesis, you're going to test it out, see if it works. And that's a little scary, because the first thing you test may not work, and you may be tempted to go back into let me try 5 things all at once. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about area development. I know this is one aspect of the franchising world you work in. I'd like to know a little bit about how that differs from merely running the day-to-day operations of a franchise.
Yep. No, it's obviously it's a different role. I mean, you're kind of in that role, I'm sort of wearing a quasi sort of franchisor hat. I mean, the franchise candidates that sign on with Blow are still, signing on with Blow at the corporate level, but I'm part of the sales process there. So I think for me, one of the nice things within that is it definitely gives you a much better window into the franchisor, to the corporate. And I would say, a much more active dialogue with the corporate team perhaps than a regular franchisee, if I would just, kind of operating the 1 or 2 locations here. And then I think it's, for me, part of what was attractive about, that opportunity was, one of the things I felt I was really good at in my banking career was coaching people. And, as part of this role, as franchisees sign on, I'm then, and my team are then responsible for helping them through the entire process. So site selection, build out, training in the run up to opening, and then ongoing support and coaching once they're operating. That really sort of is something that I'm sort of passionate about. And I think it's just, I'm really looking forward to that. We've got a couple of people that are working on their first location, so they're starting the training process. We've got a bunch more people in the pipeline, so it's that part's now starting to get really interesting.
One quick coaching question for you. There's a truth you are aware of. Someone needs to hear it, but it's an unpleasant one to hear. How do you tell them?
I think the hardest thing with my coaching in prior career has always been generally with people that have been part of my team. I've been a mentor for people in other businesses, but generally the coaching has been people on your team. This obviously this relationship is a little bit different, but I've always believed that if there are issues you have to address it. You try to find a constructive way to do it, but you're talking them through what the issue is and why they need to, what will be the outcome of addressing it, and then giving your views on how to address that.
All right, let's talk about Ceteris for a little bit. How did your relationship with Ceteris begin?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's purely coincidental that they're based here in Charleston and we are. I started when we set up our businesses. I started with a local bookkeeping firm, and candidly, partway through the first 5-6 months, we were up and running. And, then one of the things I spent time on was looking at our steady state, cost base of where are areas that I can either, kind of manage my costs better, and or, the end product, from that. And I think, I got introduced to a couple of folks at Ceteris and, looked at their product, and I thought it was great, both from, kind of an ease of use. And by that, I mean, kind of the inputs into producing our monthly accounts. I was spending a lot of time on that with my prior bookkeeping firm. Yeah. And it was costing me more. So to me, that seemed like a really good equation. I was going to have to spend less time, and it was going to be better value for money as well.
So for a new franchise owner, accounting is this very intimidating kind of thing. What advice would you give to them for when they should start to think about that and how they should begin that process of, getting that side of things in order?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on I would say the nature of the business. Mm-hmm. Some businesses are, the moment you sign the franchise agreement, you're kind of open for business. Yeah. If it's not a, bricks and mortar. In my case, we had a, prolonged kind of search for space and build out here. So we didn't really look at the bookkeeping piece until we were closer to opening. But I think depending on, and I obviously with my banking background, I was very comfortable with the financial piece. So for me, that was one of those things that I knew I wasn't going to do it myself. And I can't believe that people do their own accounting. But it was also not something that I felt I had to solve on, day one after signing the franchise agreement. But I think, the danger if you get so, as you head towards an opening of a business, there are so many other things pulling on your time, whether it's staffing, marketing, and then delivery of whatever the service is that your business is providing. If you don't get that stuff sorted out before you get rolling, it's really hard to catch up, and then tough when you get to, depending on what your audience is, whether it's investors that have invested with you or, filing your taxes. Yeah. Good luck.
All right. So you get into a time machine, you go back and you're talking to Jeremy on day one, and younger Jeremy looks you in the eye and says, "What am I taking too seriously right now?" What do you tell him?
On day one, I think in many ways we probably underestimated just how hard we were going to have to work. And that's that for both my wife and I, that's not a problem. I think we've jumped in, and we're absolutely passionate about succeeding here. But I think we probably underestimated the complexity of running your own businesses, and the fact that everything kind of comes back and stops with you. And that's very different from a corporate career. Even though I had my last role, I had probably 400 people in my team, and I always felt the buck stopped with me, but it didn't, because I didn't have to make payroll.
Yeah.
So I think, I think we probably underestimated that.
Was there anything you overestimated?
No, I didn't think so.
Yeah.
I didn't think so.
Yeah. For someone that's on the fence, they're thinking about, going into the franchising world, but they're wondering if this is right for me. What are the things they need to think about?
That's a great question, and I think I think in a lot of cases, I obviously see, this day to day as I talk to candidates that are looking at Blow here in the Southeast,
Mm-hmm.
And I think one thing that I realize in those conversations is that it's generally it's a huge decision for people.
Yeah.
And it should be. I mean, if you're moving from a corporate career, in my case, it was a little bit easier because I wasn't making the decision to move. Somebody had made that decision for me. But I think in a lot of cases, I see, a lot of our candidates are, perhaps they're something's triggering that thought of change, but actually making that change is a big decision. I think in terms of when you're at that point, I think a critical piece is just understanding, how all-encompassing, going into a business is. And I think, I definitely see people from time to time that kind of feel like you could buy into a franchise, pay the fee, hang the sign up, and everything will be great.
Yeah, the turnkey system.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, I think the beauty of a franchise system is that it brings, an enormous amount of, of support, of, that intangible team of other franchisees that you can consult with and actually form some great friendships as well.
Yeah.
But you really have to work at it. You are a business owner.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be the sort of first thing I would say is be sure that whatever stage in life you're at, that you have the time and the energy and the commitment to kind of do that. And if you do and you have the ambition to do that, I think I would say life's too short to kind of not try to pursue things that that you really want to. And so if you have the opportunity, I think the rewards from it in terms of, hopefully financial, but also, just the feeling of kind of, running your own business, building a team, I think those are really great.
Jeremy, I am a lover of books, and I'm always curious when I talk to successful people, what's one book that's significantly impacted your life?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I get asked that, every now and again. I would say it's Jim Collins' is Good to Great. And why with that? I think it's his focus on get the right people on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like absolutely been critical as I look back at my my banking career, running teams, building teams. That was all about getting the right people on the bus. And I wasn't, I was less sure about how important that would be going into this small business world, and back to some of the things we talked about earlier in terms of, as you build a team, but it's absolutely, in many ways, even more critical when you have a small business team, because, you don't have that big corporate infrastructure to lean on. And so those people are even more important.
For people that are listening to this episode and they're thinking, I really like this guy, how do I follow up on him and support him? How do they do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, certainly if anybody is interested to talk about Blow in the Southeast, you could find me on LinkedIn, Jeremy Bollington. Just search me on there and feel free to message me. I'd love to chat with you. And also, if you're, I actually published an article a while back on my transition. If you're in corporate land and thinking about making a transition, take a read of the article. I talk about what I went through and the decision process. And I'm actually working on like a follow up to that to go on to LinkedIn shortly, hopefully.
Awesome. I'll make sure we share the link to that article when we share the podcast. Jeremy, thanks so much for stopping by and sharing your story and your insights.
TK, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
For added insights and a full collection of episodes from Small Business Edge, visit ceteris.com/podcast.